So I decided to film me reading another article. I listened to the last video and the audio was predictably crappy. I also don't speak clearly. So I'll try and do a better job on this one. This article is called Abdominal Hypertrophy Syndrome, Characteristics and Potential Pathophysiology. And it's by Suslin, capital Suslin, Efimenko, Castrellon, and Husain is the last author, Husain. It's in a journal called Cureus, Cureus, which looks like an open access journal, so like a PLOS. I am a molecular neuroscientist. I've 12 plus years of education and about 15 years post-education. I ruck and do heavy stuff and watch a lot of strongman, and I watch a lot of reaction videos on fat acceptance movement videos. Currently watching a lot of Chikara transformations with glitter and lasers. Chikara is transformations is a bodybuilder. Lona M. Her last name starts with an M. I don't remember. Anyway, so I get curious about some stuff. There's a lot of misinformation in the fat activist, or what's it called, the fat acceptance reaction community, and I get curious about stuff and I look it up. Last night I was curious about steroid gut and what causes it, and this is an article on that we are going to read. So, Abdominal Hypertrophy Syndrome, Characteristics and Potential Pathophysiology. Abstract. Abdominal hypertrophy syndrome, known as steroid gut, is an uncommon condition affecting bodybuilders and athletes engaged in prolonged use of growth hormone, GH, insulin, and other anabolic agents. The condition is more commonly known in the professional bodybuilding community as Palumboism, named after Dave Palumbo, an American bodybuilder. It is characterized by significant enlargement and distension of the abdomen. Precise pathophysiological mechanisms and underlying causes of Palumboism have yet to be fully understood. The primary objective of this study is to conduct a comprehensive literature review on the condition and explore the pathophysiology and possible treatment modalities. We aim to contribute to the existing knowledge of Palumboism and lay the foundation for clinical and surgical management. A literature review was conducted using PubMed and other sources. A note here for me, this is something that is often misunderstood, I guess. So PubMed is a part of NCBI, which is a collection run by I think it is still run by the National Institutes of Health. And anything funded by one of the organizations of the National Institutes of Health goes into PubMed for the most part. So I'm a molecular neuroscientist, meaning I do hard science, social sciences. It should still be the same. I know that there are other, like PsycInfo, EBSCOhost, other databases, but I believe anything funded by any of the National Institutes of Health will go into NCBI. Sometimes you'll find people say this study was done by the National Institutes of Health. That is incorrect, unless the authors are from there. So if you want to know who did a study, you would look at the author information, which for this article, Plastic Surgery, Larkin Community Hospital, Miami, USA. That's the corresponding author's affiliate. And that's all of the author's affiliate. And actually, the last author isn't the corresponding author. So anytime you look at an article, the two most important somewhat authors are the first and last usually. The last is usually corresponding. In this one, Efimenko, Efimenko, is the corresponding author. And so this study was done by these doctors at this hospital. The other thing you want to look at is the disclosure statement. Sometimes funding comes from private industry that doesn't necessarily discount the study, which is another thing that is often cited wrong in reaction videos. It just is something to take into account when reading the study. Being a scientist, I've been outside of my degree for going on 15 years. Excuse me. And I am very poor. You don't get paid a lot. And that's not to say that you would never take money from a company, but your pay is directly related to the funding you get and the organization you work for. And the pay you get is related to the funding you bring in. So bringing in funding from an outside, for me, I do disease research with neurosciences, so all of our funding, I think almost exclusively, the funding with the clients I work with comes from National Institutes of Health or private organizations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation or nonprofit, not-for-profit collections for a certain neurological disease. So there's Down syndrome ones, ALS, etc. But taking money from a company, like applying for a grant where the company is giving out money, including, let's just say like Coca-Cola to do a nutrition study, that doesn't necessarily discount the study. It is something to take into account, which is why you have disclosures. But yeah, it doesn't completely discount the work done. So let's keep reading. Hopefully, where was I? Okay, a literature review was conducted using PubMed and other sources. So usually when I do literature reviews, I use almost exclusively PubMed. A lot of times I'll see PubMed and Google Scholar in literature reviews I read. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention was that all of my work is pretty much reading and publishing. So I switched from doing wet lab work to doing data analysis, meaning I have clients, they give me their data, usually gene information or protein information, from humans, sometimes animal models, mostly humans at this point. And then I do my magic, come up with conclusions, and then we publish. And publishing, once it's published, it goes to a journal, and then PubMed has articles from those journals. So PubMed is a central resource. It's what's it called? Collated? No. Yeah. We'll just use that word for now. I'm not a morning person. This is in the morning. It's collated, I guess, by one of the National Institutes of Health organizations, but it's not research done by them. It can be, but usually it isn't. So that was what I wanted to say on PubMed, because that's something that people often get wrong. Specific keywords, going back to the article, specific keywords such as palumboism, bodybuilder gut, steroid gut, HGH gut, insulin gut, bubble gut, muscle gut, abdominal distension, abdominal organomegaly, visceral adiposity, abdominal obesity, anabolic steroids, and growth hormone were employed to retrieve relevant articles. The inclusion criteria focused on studies that investigated the pathophysiology, clinical presentation, and management of palumboism. A total of 1,222 studies were identified through the search criteria, of which 451 were screened. 33 were assessed for eligibility, and 30 studies were included in the final review. Literature review revealed that no peer-reviewed studies dedicated to palumboism, underscoring the insufficient research conducted in this area. I think it's kind of interesting that they chose to use the word palumboism throughout, but, yeah, that's just a side note. The available anecdotal data suggests that prolonged use of high-dose anabolic steroids, particularly human growth hormone and insulin, may contribute to the development of palumboism. Several potential mechanisms have been proposed, including visceral adiposity, organomegaly, and altered collagen synthesis. Given the dearth of available research on palumboism, a comprehensive understanding of this condition is yet to be established. Further studies are warranted to elucidate the pathophysiology, establish diagnostic criteria, and explore treatment options for affected individuals. So that's the abstract. I first was looking this up because I was thinking, like, how do these people win these competitions, which are largely appearance-based, with this distended gut, which in my head I like to call bubble gut, which is one of the terms they searched, or steroid gut. It just kind of messes up the overall look. And I was also curious about how permanent it was. There's something else more technical I wanted to... Well, anyways, so this is a literature review. Okay, introduction and background, going back to the article. Palumboism, colloquially referred to as steroid gut, represents a distinctive condition characterized by the development of a prominently enlarged and distended abdomen among bodybuilders and athletes who engage in prolonged anabolic steroid usage. Despite its widespread recognition within the bodybuilding and fitness community, Palumboism does not hold official recognition as a medical term or a specific diagnosis in the realm of medical literature. Notably absent are formal classification and diagnostic criteria, resulting in its omission from standard medical textbooks and authoritative classifications presented by organizations such as the World Health Organization, WHO, and the American Medical Association, AMA. And I'm just going to note, I'm not against steroids or cycles, whatever people want to do in powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman communities, but you do have to recognize that this is something people do to themselves. So that may also add to why it's not a specific diagnosis, but I would think the main reason is people don't go to the doctor for it, because in the community, once it starts happening, you recognize that this is now what you look like. And I think I'm going to go ahead, this is just me talking. I mean, obviously, I guess I don't have to say that, but I'm going to go ahead and posit that once someone gets to the point of developing bubble gut, they're so deep in using that they aren't doing cycles, they're just using chronically. So cycling is very effective, and it's, I want to say ubiquitous in certain communities, and cycling is using it for a period of time. And I mean, usually it's a cocktail, according to my understanding. So you might have testosterone. I'm a little out of my depth. I don't know in what form, like whether it's precursor, replacement therapy, etc. But let's just say anabolic steroids. Here, it says I guess maybe anabolic steroids encompasses human growth hormone, testosterone, and everything else. Insulin. But anyways, you cycle with the cocktail and then you have a long period of time without it. I would posit, and hopefully this article will address it, that by the time you are developing the steroid gut or palumboism, you are using chronically, and you aren't going to go to a doctor because you aren't going to stop using, and it's just something that you are accepting. So with that, you would not necessarily expect a diagnosis. By the time people go to a doctor for something, it's not for the cosmetic appearance. Yeah, it's going to be from other like metabolic problems or probably your heart. Okay, going back to the article. While palumboism serves as a well-known concept in certain circles, medical professionals conventionally employ the terms abdominal enlargement or abdominal distension to depict the visible outcome observed in individuals immersed in extended anabolic steroid usage. And in my note, I'm assuming everyone knows what this looks like. I don't have time to edit videos, add pictures and everything, which is why I just have whatever video of fluid. But abdominal distension is like the most accurate term for what you see. Going back to the article, in scientific and medical literature, more encompassing descriptions may emerge, such as abdominal organomegaly or visceral adiposity, focusing on the physiological shifts underlying prolonged steroid exposure rather than relying on the specific label of palumboism. The emergence of what is colloquially termed bubble gut or palumboism among bodybuilders since its introduction in the 1990s has emerged as a notable concern within the fitness community. The issue significantly influences the aesthetic qualities of athletes and bodybuilders alike. Despite its prevalence, a consensus pertaining to medical or surgical management of this condition remains elusive. While the precise etiology of this phenomenon remains enigmatic, it is hypothesized that various contributing factors synergistically culminate in abdominal distension and enlargement. A conspicuous element influencing bubble gut is the utilization of human growth hormone HGH among bodybuilders, frequently in doses that far exceed typical therapeutic ranges. Elevated HGH levels have the potential to induce excessive tissue expansion, including within the intestines, thereby leading to a substantial increase in abdominal size. So my note, that would be why you still see the abs over it. I mean, or organomegaly would also be, because that's enlargement of the organs. Back to the article. Studies examining the effects of overexpressing bovine growth hormone, GH, in transgenic mice have revealed marked increases in the weight and length of small bowel, accompanied by a 50 to 100% amplification in mucosal mass. This evidence is reinforced by additional investigations demonstrating elevated villus content of IGF-1 mRNA in the bowel of GH transgenic mice compared to the wild-type counterparts, supporting the notion of localized IGF-1 production stimulated by GH. Moreover, in rats subjected to substantial 75 to 80% small intestinal resection, both HGH and IGF-1 were found to enhance the postoperative hyperplasia evident in the ileal remnant. In the context of humans, growth hormone, or somatotropin, engages its membrane-bound growth hormone receptor GHR situated on hepatocytes, subsequently activating the cytoplasmic tyrosine kinase Janus kinase 2, JAK2. This activation leads to tyrosine phosphorylation within both the JAK2 enzyme and GHR. So me talking, hepatocytes are liver cells. JAK2 or Janus kinase 2 is a very common tyrosine kinase. Tyrosine kinase, it's a signaling pathway, so tyrosine phosphorylation. Anything with kinase means it's phosphorylated. Phosphatase means it's dephosphorylated. All this is a signaling pathway within the cells. So something happens to the outside Janus kinase. I think it's usually, let's just look up, what are we talking about? Growth hormone receptor. So now I do mostly molecular biology, but biochemistry I do, it's part and parcel. Janus kinase. I'm looking up if this is membrane bound. Yeah. Or cell membrane bound. I mean, there's lots of membranes inside the cell. But, yeah, so it would be an activation pathway. So growth hormone would attach to the receptor on the outside of the cell, and then inside the cell, JAK2 or Janus kinase would be, tyrosine kinase. The tyrosine residues would be phosphorylated. So tyrosine is an amino acid. Everything is made up of amino acids, which is why being a vegan is not conducive to life. And tyrosine phosphorylation, there are a few amino, yeah, that's one of the most common. I'm a neuroscientist, and that's common there in signaling. So phosphorylation just means attaching a phosphate, which is a, I guess, chemical moiety. Going back to the article, consequently, the liver secretes insulin like growth factor, IGF-1, or somatomedian, which binds to its receptor on colonic epithelial cells, orchestrating heightened epithelial proliferation, reduced apoptosis, and intensified angiogenesis. So me talking, they're just explaining how mechanistically you would end up with an enlarged gut, and this is one pathway that would be at play. And it's a pretty, based on what they're explaining, this is a pretty, a pretty general biochemical process, so I would posit that this is definitely happening, possibly with other things, but it all sounds legit. It's a weird thing to say. Back to the article. This relationship between extensive epithelial proliferation and a broad proliferation zone with the levels of GH and IGF-1 is evident in the colons of acromegalic patients. Acromegaly, characterized by excessive growth hormone production and resulting in progressive somatic disfigurement and systemic manifestations, potentially shares intestinal pathophysiological mechanisms with palumboism. So acromegaly, we are also familiar with the appearance. I believe Andre the Giant condition. I believe that's what he had. Yeah, acromegaly, a disorder caused by a pituitary gland tumor. It can be. I believe there are other causes. Once you get into the hormone systems, there are several points of where stuff can go wrong. But so acromegaly, typically will have the enlarged ears, acromegaly appearance. It would be great if I had time to edit this and show you guys stuff. Enlarged ears, enlarged nose, enlarged hands. I've seen someone in real life with acromegaly, and the hands are striking. So is the face. The face appearances too. Just enlarged features, and then you also have the total body growth. Almost an arthritic appearance to the hands without the torsion. Okay, going back to the article. While prior research has extensively explored the utilization of anabolic androgenic steroids, AAS, including testosterone and its derivatives, limited attention has been dedicated to other frequently used performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, like growth hormone, insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, and insulin itself. Okay, so my note, 2 notes. One, IGF-1 is with a Roman numeral. I've never seen that before. I don't know. I'm assuming it's, it might be the protein. I work primarily with genes and mRNA. IGF-1. This is just for my own information. Let me see, I have a Unipro. Let me look it up here. IGF-1. So I'm looking this up in a protein database. Because sometimes proteins are written different, and it's going slow, so we'll just skip that point. The other point is, before I said I was out of my depth, and I don't know what they mean by anabolic. So this is anabolic androgenic steroids, right, which would include testosterone and its derivatives. But other growth hormone, insulin like growth factor would be separate, would not be included in anabolic steroids, but would be included in performance-enhancing drugs. And PEDs, sometimes you see PEIDs, which is performance-enhancing image, or PIEDs, performance image enhancing drugs. Back to the article. In 1992, a study disclosed that roughly 5% of male high school students acknowledged experimenting with growth hormone during their high school athletic careers, with a notable portion being acquainted with peers similarly involved in growth hormone usage. Moreover, among middle-aged and elderly individuals, the pursuit of growth hormone administration aims to augment muscle mass and recapture youthful physical attributes. The pervasiveness of PED misuse extends to the weightlifting community, as evidenced by a survey of 231 weightlifters, where 12% admitted to historical and or current growth hormone or IGF-1 usage. So 12% seems low, with a substantial 80% of these respondents exhibiting indications of prior or ongoing AAS dependence. Another noteworthy addition to PEDs and insulin, frequently adopted by bodybuilders due to its purported anabolic effects, including the vital stimulation of glycogen synthesis for post-exercise muscle recovery. Yeah, there are 2 reasons to use it. Both to see, this is me speaking, both to see the gains. You work hard, and sometimes you'll see people, like in documentaries, or not documentaries, but TV documentaries, those shows that follow people like Intervention. There's this one lady, she had an binge eating disorder, I believe, binge purge, and she worked out excessively. Not excessively, she just went to the gym on a regular basis, and you would think, like, man, if she had her diet down, she would look huge. But just looking at her, she looked healthy size and fit, but she didn't look like she went to the gym like 3 hours every day. Where was I going with that? Oh, that was a tangent I should have gone off on. My point is, you work out a lot, and sometimes you don't see the gains you want. For myself, I wouldn't use performance-enhancing drugs because I'm a middle-aged woman. It would just be a bad idea to use them for the first time. But the post-exercise muscle recovery, that would tempt me. You want to continue working on your body and your whatever you're working on, and you can't. You have to wait sometimes. Okay. Back to the article. Review. To comprehensively investigate palumboism, an extensive and rigorous literature review was conducted. The primary objective was to gather a broad range of relevant studies pertaining to this condition. To achieve this, a systematic search strategy was employed utilizing the PubMed database and Google Scholar search engine. So me talking, as I said before, this is common to see. I'll use generally just PubMed, but seeing PubMed and Google Scholar is common in today's... I didn't say when this was published. This was published 2024 in today's articles. So, going back, and this is just covering the methods, I guess. There's no header for methods, but anyway, this is going to repeat some of the abstract. Back to the article. To ensure a comprehensive search, a set of carefully selected keywords was employed. These keywords were chosen based on their relevance to palumboism and its associated features. The specific terms used in the search included palumboism, bodybuilder gut, steroid gut, HGH bloat, insulin gut, bubble gut, muscle gut, abdominal distension, abdominal organomegaly, visceral adiposity, abdominal obesity, anabolic steroids, and growth hormone. By incorporating these diverse keywords, we aim to capture a wide array of studies and articles that explored various aspects of palumboism. The intention was to encompass research related to pathophysiology, clinical presentation, and management of this condition. Through the utilization of these keywords, we sought to identify studies that specifically address the mechanisms underlying palumboism, the characteristic clinical manifestations observed in affected individuals, and the strategies employed for its management. So just to break down they said pathophysiology, clinical presentation, and management. Pathophysiology would be what is happening in the body from a disease perspective. So a disease patho, meaning disease physiology, meaning what is happening. A lot of times in reaction communities, they'll use the term biological. It's not accurate. Physiological will be more accurate. And actually, sometimes when I read grants from clients, so for senior scientists in the field, they'll also do the same thing. So that's what's actually happening in the person's body. Clinical presentation is what the doctor can see, and these can overlap. And the management would be, in this case, if there are underlying problems affecting the organs, organomegaly, anytime something is enlarged, it's not good. Like, everything in that system is working harder. And also the appearance, I would imagine people would want to fix that. And that this article is written by plastic surgeons, it kind of makes me wonder if maybe they have had some clients come in, or if they are just involved in gym culture, for lack of a better term, and they were curious the same way I was. Going back to the article, the search process involved careful examination and evaluation of each retrieved article to determine its relevance and suitability for inclusion in the literature review. The exclusion criteria consisted of studies that were not peer-reviewed, involved non-adult populations, were duplicates, were not in English, and did not comply with the intended clinical presentation. Only studies that directly addressed the pathophysiology, clinical presentation, and management of palumboism were selected for further analysis and inclusion in the review. And I'm reading this quickly because it's just methods and repetitive. A total of 1,222 studies were identified through the search criteria, of which 451 were screened, 33 were assessed for eligibility, and 30 studies were included in the final review. So me speaking, those numbers are pretty typical for a literature review. I also want to note on not including studies that were not peer-reviewed. So there's a lot of talk around peer-reviewed by people who have no clue what they're talking about. Peer-reviewed doesn't okay, so when I write an article with people I collaborate with, we submit it to a specific journal. That journal then sends the article out to 2 to 3, typically, other scientists in the field. They comment on the article, comment on very specific comments on the article, as well as the editor for the journal comments on the article. And I'm an editor for content editor for a few journals, meaning I would the editor then brings together their comments and the scientist comments. So I do that for a few journals. And you don't get paid for it. For a reason why scientists are very poor. So every article I submit, we get these peer reviews back. We also do peer reviews for other people. The peers are not always peers. Sometimes they're out of their depth. They have no fucking clue what they're talking about, and their comments reflect that they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. And then you just try and delicately respond. Sometimes you get really good peer reviews, and most of the time you approach them with the thought that this is going to help the article. But sometimes, especially for the stuff I do, because it's very data technical, computational, and molecular biological. And at this point, everyone in neuroscience wants to believe that they understand molecular biology. I'm here to say that they don't. Peer review process, it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's the best we have, but it is operationally the best we have right now. It doesn't mean that it's faultless. However, because something is peer reviewed, okay, I'm going to say this way. This is what people get wrong a lot. You can't make a blanket statement and say, well, peer reviewed means nothing because the peers are idiots. I laugh because I would be included in that. I mean, on both ends of it. And you can't say, well, it's peer reviewed, so therefore this is like textbook. This is now how things are. You can't say either things. It's a good process. It helps weed out some stuff, but it's not faultless. Also, because scientists don't get paid for peer reviewed, sometimes you have limited time and you just do the best you can with an article. I think the biggest problem with peer reviewed is having peers, quote unquote, that have no clue what they're talking about reviewing articles, and then you lose that slot for the peer review. Say I have 2 people peer reviewing plus the editor an article I submit, and one of the peers doesn't know what they're talking about and just says things I should change that make no fucking sense computationally or molecular biologically, and then I have to respond to that. But that takes away a spot where a good peer review could have come in and said, hey, did you think about doing this? And I could then reply to that. That's my note on peer reviewed / rant. I was also going to say, I believe everything on PubMed is from journals that are peer-reviewed, and even open access journals generally have a peer review process. It may not be as rigorous, and with open access, there aren't limits to, word count. And some of the, you'll find articles that are lengthy and repetitive and should not have made it through a peer review process, but they did. I believe everything on PubMed is peer-reviewed, except with the exception of editor's notes or interviews, which wouldn't be considered here. Did they say specifically if they were looking at original these keywords? No, just the terms they searched. They didn't say that they limited to a type of articles. They just say studies and articles. Yeah, so when they're talking about limiting non-peer-reviewed, I would think that would refer more to the Google Scholar search. Comment below if you have experience otherwise. Going back to the article, during the literature review, it became apparent that there is a scarcity of studies dedicated to investigating palumboism. The existing body of literature primarily comprises anecdotal evidence indicating a significant research gap in this field. The limited availability of substantial research underscores the need for further investigation on this condition. And then my note, I wonder if in anecdotal they're including case reports. And case reports they're technical, but I mean, they are somewhat anecdotal, or it's like a one-off, right? It's this person presented with this, we treated it like this. In grad school, I found one where it was some dude super glued his eye shut, went to the emergency room, and the doctors took the time to write up an article of how they got the super glue off without blinding him. I was like, that's super helpful if I worked in an ER, but the fact that they took the time to write that up, I thought was very kind. I mean, they also got credit for having an article published, but anyway, don't super glue your eyes shut, kids. Back to the article. Based on the available evidence, it is suggested that prolonged and high-dose usage of anabolic steroids, particularly GH and insulin, may play a role in the development of palumboism. However, the current understanding of the underlying mechanisms is extremely limited. Several potential mechanisms have been proposed to explain the abdominal distension observed in individuals with palumboism. So scrolling down, now the article is going to cover a few of those, and the headings are Cushing's syndrome, GH, growth hormone, IGF-1, and here it doesn't have a Roman numeral. But then in the text it has a Roman numeral again. Which again, maybe protein you do use the Roman numeral normally. I see it without it. It doesn't matter. Insulin, and then conclusions. So let's go through each of these with hopefully limited speaking from me. Cushing's syndrome. Mechanisms of visceral obesity and Cushing's syndrome are related to glucocorticoids' regulative action on adipose tissue differentiation, function, and distribution. In excess, glucocorticoids cause central obesity. Adipose stromal cells from omental fat, but not subcutaneous fat, can generate active cortisol from inactive cortisone through the expression of enzyme 11-beta-HSD1. The expression of which is increased further after exposure to cortisol and insulin. Glucocorticoids are regulated by adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. In one controlled study examining the increase of reinforcing value of exercise as opposed to drug-induced euphoria in athletes using anabolic and androgenic steroids, the anabolic androgenic steroids group had significantly higher ACTH levels than the heavy exercising controls. These mechanisms in part can hypothetically contribute to the development of abdominal distension in athletes and bodybuilders. Hang on, let me read that again to myself. Okay, in one controlled study examining the increase of reinforcing value of exercise as opposed to drug-induced euphoria. So reinforcing in athletes using steroids. The group that used steroids had significantly higher ACTH levels than... I don't know if I'm missing something in reading that. The title of that article referenced is Exercise Reinforcement, Stress, and Beta Endorphins. An initial examination... did I say that right? An initial examination of exercise in anabolic androgenic steroid dependence. So I think here, I don't think we're delving into the reinforcing value of exercise versus drug-induced euphoria. I think that they just included that because that's what the study was on. Their point is just from that study, athletes using anabolic androgenic steroids had significantly higher ACTH than people who heavily exercised but did not use those steroids. That's where I was confused. Okay, moving on. Heading growth hormone. Organomegaly, which refers to abnormal enlargement of organs, has been postulated as another contributing factor to palumboism. The prolonged use of HGH may lead to hypertrophy or enlargement of abdominal organs, further exacerbating the distension of the abdomen. However, there exists limited comprehensive empirical evidence concerning adverse outcomes associated with misuse of growth hormone in human subjects. The majority of reported instances detailing side effects are predominantly anecdotal in nature and are often intertwined with the misuse of multiple compounds. These potential consequences are posited to mirror those observed in cases of acromegaly, a condition characterized by excessive growth hormone production which may manifest as hypertension, carpal tunnel syndrome, diabetes, neuropathy, and a range of other maladies. However, it is important to acknowledge that the potential for unidentified side effects exists in cases of excessive or inappropriate use, particularly when growth hormone is combined with other agents or administered at elevated doses. In animal studies, the administration of supraphysiological doses of growth hormone has been linked to organ enlargement, most notably cardiomegaly, a phenomenon analogous to that seen in acromegaly. Furthermore, instances of edema, orthostatic hypotension, myositis, carpal tunnel syndrome, and gynecomastia have been documented in frail, elderly individuals subjected to GH administration, while occurrences of carpal tunnel syndrome and hyperglycemia have been noted in GH administration in healthy adults. So there's a lot to comment on in this article, me talking, not the article. First, a lot of these signs are common in very obese individuals, which is not super surprising. I think BMI, whether you have a high BMI because of muscle mass or because of fat, the point for me as a scientist who gets brain tissue afterwards, and it has to consider things like metabolic syndromes, it doesn't matter to me because the body is still working overtime. And you still have chronic inflammation in either condition. It's like neither is conducive to a super long life. I almost said neither is healthy, but that's not exactly the point I wanted to make. So here we have excessive acromegaly with excessive growth hormone production. They say hypertension, carpal tunnel syndrome, diabetes, neuropathy, and a range of other maladies. And then there is also with the enlarged organ enlargement. Furthermore, instances of edema, orthostatic hypotension, that's when you feel faint when you stand up. Myositis, and the inflammation in the muscles, I'm guessing. Carpal tunnel syndrome, and gynecomastia, I think that's when breast form in men, have been documented in frail elderly individuals subjected to growth hormone. It's funny that they say subjected to growth hormone. I imagine it was done with the elderly individuals' well-being in mind, but maybe that therapy has been debunked as something you shouldn't do. I think it's interesting wording, but the other stuff is also what you see with obesity: edema, orthostatic hypotension, myositis, carpal tunnel syndrome, gynecomastia. And I would not be surprised if obese individuals had elevated growth hormone. Let's just see. Obesity. So I'm doing a search that is not scientific. I'm in PubMed and I'm doing obesity elevated growth hormone, which I can see like content creators, people who respond to fat acceptance, doing something like that. The scientific way to do it would be obesity growth hormone without the word use of the word elevated, because here I'm looking for something that says elevated growth hormone. It's going to take me, I'm not going to be able to quickly find this. They don't want to use an AI because I would write my own NLP for that if I were to do that, if I wanted to use a summarization software. But I would not be surprised if growth hormone levels were elevated in obese individuals. Not saying that that's what causes these other conditions. I just would not be surprised. Okay, IGF-1, the next heading. Most attributes associated with the misuse of IGF-1 are challenging to differentiate from those arising due to growth hormone misuse, given that heightened growth hormone levels also stimulate IGF-1 production. Nonetheless, instances of hypoglycemia, seizures, jaw pain, myalgia, edema, headaches, augmented liver and kidney dimensions, and modified liver function, among other effects, have been documented subsequent to the administration of recombinant human IGF-1, rhIGF-1. Among the prevalent adverse reactions, erythema and lipohypertrophy at the injection site have also been most frequently reported. Erythema and duh. Like, it's not surprising, is it? I'm gonna read the sentence with the Let's just read this whole paragraph again. Most attributes associated with misuse of IGF-1 are challenging to differentiate from those arising from growth hormone misuse, given that heightened growth hormone levels also stimulate IGF-1 production. And we covered that above with the JAK kinase, or Janus kinase JAK2 pathway. Nonetheless, instances of hypoglycemia, seizures, jaw pain, myalgia, edema, headaches, augmented liver and kidney dimensions, and modified liver function, among other effects, have been documented subsequent to the administration of recombinant human IGF-1. And that would probably be for therapeutic reasons. So I'm just going to read the title of the article's referenced because it's interesting to me. Side effects resulting from the use of growth hormone and insulin like growth factor 1 as combined therapy to frail elderly patients. So, yeah, again, that's both growth hormone, but IGF-1 given as a therapy. The next article we're gonna skip that because it's words I can't. Oh, I'll try. Mecasermin rinfabate, which is likely a pharmaceutical drug. Recombinant IGF-1 and recombinant IGF binding protein 3 complex IPLEX. Yeah, so that's just an article about that drug. Next article, somatomedian 1, recombinant insulin like growth factor 1. Okay, so that's what somatomedian is. We saw that somatomedin. We saw that earlier in this article. So that's not... I'd never heard of it. I was assuming it was a physiological hormone, but it sounds like it's recombinant insulin like growth factor 1, and that's the pharmacological name for it is somatomedian. The article title, somatomedin 1, recombinant insulin like growth factor 1, clinical pharmacology and potential treatment of endocrine and metabolic disorders. And then the last article referenced insulin like growth factor 1 and cancer mortality in older men. So moving on, the next heading is insulin. Altered collagen synthesis with the use of insulin has been suggested as a potential mechanism underlying palumboism. That's interesting. So one of the reasons why women have collagen, what's it called? The buckling, is the layering in men and women. For the most part, I don't remember the exact numbers from grad school, but it's something like 70 to 80% of women, you have fat and then collagen and then skin. Men, you have collagen and then fat and then skin. So you don't see the buckling in men as often as in women. So here they're saying altered collagen synthesis with the use of insulin has been suggested as potential. So with collagen, fat, then skin, that layering, if you had a lot of collagen being synthesized, that would definitely extend or distend an area. So I wonder if that's abdominally. If it happened in the rest of the body, I mean, that would just be adding to the effect you're going for, right? It's that cosmetic look of enlarged muscles. Like you wouldn't notice it, but you also wouldn't complain. The problem with the abdomen is you got stuff doing the work for the body under there. You got your organs under there, and it just looks awful. But if you had this happening, like say in a bicep, it wouldn't look awful. You would just be swole. Going back to the article, fibroblasts are the primary cells responsible for the production of collagen. Collagen is a key component of connective tissues, including the fascia and muscles of the abdomen. Insulin increased collagen production by 2 to 3-fold and total protein production by 2-fold in cultures of lung fibroblasts. Oh, insulin increased. Okay, sorry, read that wrong. In cardiac myocytes, insulin increases DNA and collagen synthesis in fibroblasts in a dose-dependent fashion. What the fuck? It doesn't increase DNA. What the fuck is this? In cardiac myocytes, insulin increases DNA and collagen synthesis. I'm going to assume they mean mRNA. And they mean DNA transcription, maybe? I mean, I've been wrong before, but this sounds fucking weird. Insulin increases DNA and collagen. Also, I'm cool because I'm cuss. There's a video on Chakar transformations, and Anna was cussing at people, which that's how you know she's a badass. And then she did the peace sign at the end, and I was like, damn, I wish I could be as cool as her. Maybe one day, guys. I just got to cuss at my haters and then do the peace sign, deuces out. Anyway, if you don't watch Fat never mind, just never mind. Back to the article. In cardiac myocytes, insulin increases DNA and collagen synthesis. Increases DNA transcription. I'm adding in the word transcription because that makes it make sense. Increases DNA transcription and collagen synthesis in fibroblasts in a dose-dependent fashion. And any alterations in collagen synthesis or metabolism could result in structural changes, potentially leading to characteristic abdominal protrusion seen in palumboism. I'm still stuck on why they say increases in DNA, because I feel like maybe I'm saying something wrong, but you would never have an increase in DNA unless you're, you don't make more DNA to make mRNA and then to make proteins, or to make any RNA, not necessarily mRNA. You use the DNA that's there. I guess they could have shown increases in factors that suggest, so there are DNA replication factors that we'll see increased in neurological diseases or neurodegenerative diseases of aging. And the common reason given for that is, cells are trying to enter the cell cycle, which I don't think so. I think that could be a valid reason, but the longer I study this stuff, the more I think that, how do I say this without going too in depth or too off on a tangent? The increases in these factors that are involved in DNA replication, I think, are increased in conjunction with other things. So it's not a byproduct, but what's it called? I guess byproduct is the best I have right now. Shit. There's a word for, I don't know. I haven't had enough caffeine, I guess. It's increased, so other stuff is being increased, and these are being increased in conjunction with that, but not physiologically, for physiological use, or DNA replication enzymes, which can also be, not just helicases, but stuff like synthesis, DNA synthesis repair enzymes. We'll see that a lot, especially in the current Parkinson's disease study I'm doing. And I don't think it's necessarily because the cell is trying to re-enter the cell cycle, which basically neurons, it's not going to re-enter the cell cycle. It's going to be a precursor to apoptotic death. But here, so where they say insulin increases DNA, it could be those enzymes. I'm going to assume it just means transcription. And then it's saying collagen synthesis, which is going to be, I'm just going to look up the pathway really quick. Collagen synthesis. And if you want to do this on your own, become a scientist, you go to a claw machine that has PhDs like I did, grab a PhD, and then you go to Google image search and you type stuff like collagen synthesis. I would have to read up on I'm curious at what point what the turnover rate is for the mRNA versus so to make stuff you use templates repeatedly. So first DNA is the first template, then mRNA is the template, and anyway, we're gonna assume the DNA transcription, as I've said 50,000 times. Let's just start reading this again. The whole article. Just kidding. Insulin. Altered collagen synthesis with the use of insulin has been suggested as a potential mechanism underlying palumboism. Fibroblasts are primary cells responsible for the production of collagen. Collagen is a key component of connective tissues, including the fascia and muscles of the abdomen. Insulin increased collagen production by 2 to 3-fold and total protein production by 2-fold in cultures of lung fibroblasts. In cardiac myocytes, insulin increases DNA and collagen synthesis in fibroblasts in a dose-dependent fashion, and any alterations in collagen synthesis or metabolism could result in structural changes, potentially leading to the characteristic abdominal protrusion seen in palumboism. The pro-anabolic capabilities of insulin have been confirmed with the meta-analysis of 25 studies which showed that it exerts its positive regulation of lean muscle mass principally via an anti-catabolic effect in reducing muscle protein breakdown rather than positively affecting the muscle protein synthesis. So here we two words at play: anabolic, building up; catabolic, breaking down. And this is saying it's blocking the breaking down rather than increasing the building up. Next paragraph. Ultimately, pinpointing a specific agent to the development of palumboism is rather difficult due to the polypharmacy among users. So this is outside of the insulin. So we just covered possible reasons for palumboism, which were Cushing syndrome, growth or ACTH level, increased adrenal corticotropin hormone levels, growth hormone, IGF-1, and insulin. And now we're going to summarize and then go to conclusions. So the summary. Ultimately, pinpointing a specific agent to the development of palumboism is rather difficult due to polypharmacy among users. The overwhelming majority of individuals who engage in recreational use of anabolic agents commonly employ a combination of multiple substances. Substances frequently employed as adjuncts to anabolic androgenic steroids encompass a range of compounds including alcohol, amphetamine, caffeine, that's your girl, cannabinoids, clenbuterol, cocaine, codeine, creatine, ephedrine, erythropoietin, gamma-hydroxybutyrate, which is GHB, growth hormone, heroin, human chorionic gonadotropin, insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, tamoxifen, tobacco, and numerous others. That is a hilarious list because they alphabetized it, so I'm going to read it faster. Substances frequently employed as adjuncts to the anabolic androgenic steroids encompass a range of compounds including alcohol, amphetamine, caffeine, cannabinoids, clenbuterol, cocaine, codeine, creatine, ephedrine, erythropoietin, gamma-hydroxybutyrate, growth hormone, heroin, human chorionic gonadotropin, insulin like growth factor 1, tamoxifen, tobacco, and numerous others. I don't know. Maybe I'm childish. It's a little bit funny. Amphetamine, cocaine, and heroin. Just heroin. In a United States-based study involving 41 individuals using insulin, it was revealed that 95% of these individuals concurrently utilized androgenic anabolic steroids and engaged in polypharmacy by incorporating an average of 16.2 plus or minus 5.6 performance-enhancing drugs into their annual regime. And then conclusions. The available evidence of the pathophysiology of palumboism is very limited. Basic science pathophysiology literature, however, points to a direct role of insulin and growth hormone in the development of this condition. Furthermore, an anecdotal correlation exists between the prolonged use of high-dose anabolic steroids, particularly growth hormone and IGF-1, and the development of palumboism. This literature review is limited by the small number of available studies on the target pathology, which restricts the comprehensiveness and generalizability of the findings and underscores the urgent need for further research to build a more robust evidence base. Is it urgent, though? Is it? Subsequent research is warranted to deepen our understanding of the pathophysiology of palumboism and to explore additional contributing factors to this condition. The systematization, deal with it. The systematization of the available data has to be conducted to broaden the knowledge of complications, potential prevention, and treatment of palumboism. So that's it. That's the article. And then disclosures, conflict of interest. No conflicts of interest. So they work at a hospital in plastic surgery. It's pretty standard. So that's a standard conclusion, and even though I was laughing at use of the word the urgent need, this is what you do in conclusions. You state, like, why this needs funding in the future. So the article, yeah, it gives some insight. I don't feel like I learned anything. It's what you would expect. I don't know what I was looking for though. I guess or yeah, I do. I did learn something then. I was looking for like what agent causes it, and it's not a specific agent. It's the side effects of these cocktails, and they didn't cover like cycling and chronic versus chronic use, but I would hazard to guess that by the time you're getting this, you aren't taking breaks, you're using this nonstop. Which is definitely deleterious. That's it. Hopefully I'll do more articles, and hopefully someone will watch these videos and hopefully my audio will improve. I feel like that's under my control, but I don't have time to edit videos and add pictures and stuff, so at least you can listen to these articles in the background if I'm understandable. I've been told that I don't speak clearly. I mean, in real life. But I think having someone who's studied at least like molecular biology and biochemistry for 20 plus years is helpful. Maybe, hopefully I'm adding insight, I have nothing. Bye.